Hello and welcome to the mains PYQ discussion by Nivayes. This is a question from the 2016 mains and it's about the Buddhist art and architecture. Now, the question goes like this. Early Buddhist tuba art, while depicting folk motifs and narratives, successfully expounds Buddhist ideals. Elucidate. It's a 12.5 marker, an all format question. Now, few things that you have to understand fundamentally here is about stupa first, because stupa is a fundamental form of architecture in Buddhist tradition. You have to understand what that is to answer this question first. Second, it's about the folk motifs and narratives within the Buddhist tradition. Now, what does it ask? It asks how these folk motifs and narratives expounds Buddhist ideals. So, expounds means to explain theoretically. So, folks motifs and narratives, how do they explain Buddhist ideals? So, here you have to know what are Buddhist ideals as well. So it's about stupa art, the ideals of Buddhism, and the folk motifs and narratives related to it. So it's not a very narrow-minded question with respect to art or architecture. It's a very broad question covering a holistic dimension about Buddhism in general. Now coming to the introduction, we'll define what a stupa is. Now stupa is an architectural structure where the relic of Buddha is kept. That's stupa. Now, stupa has different purposes. It can be constructed for commemorative purposes, just to keep the relic of Buddha in it. Ashoka constructed the Sanji stupa for that. It can also be for votive purpose. That means to fulfill a vow. So, if I am a Buddhist and if I want to fulfill a vow, I can construct a stupa. So, the purpose of stupa is different. We'll define it. We'll give the different types of it. Then we'll give some examples also in the introduction. That would be Sanchi, Sarnath, Amravati, Barhat and Sannati. These are the famous stupas in India. We'll give that. Maybe you can give it as a flowchart as well, or as examples you can give it in the introduction. Now we'll give a diagram here. The diagram of stupa itself. It's a must in an answer like this. You have to give the diagram and you have to, I'll just zoom it and show you. And you have to mark the important parts. At least a few you have to mark. For example, this is called the Torina. It is a major place where the narratives and folk motifs are inscribed. So you have to give Torana. You have to give the Pradikshan Pada, which is the circumference here. This is called the Anda. You have to give that. This is the Harmika. This is the Chatri. Chatri, it has three tenets. It represents Buddham, Dharmam and Sangam. So Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. This is the famous motto or prayer within Buddhism, and this represents that. Now we have to mark that and then we'll come to the body part. So we have 6 points here. How we have given the title is Buddhist ideals through motifs and narratives. So we'll bring in both motifs and narratives within the body part and we'll connect it with the ideals. So that's the idea. The first thing is an example from the narrative tradition, not the motif. It is the Jataka stories. So Jatakas are about Buddhist stories. It can be fictional as well as real. So it's a collection of stories related to Buddhism. These Jataka stories are inscribed in the Toranas, what I just showed you here. And these Toranas, what they depict is Buddhist ideals through them. So whoever visits a stupa, you'll get an ideal through that. For example, the cycle of samsara, that is part of the Jataka story, is inscribed in the Torana, and once you go there, you can read that, you can see that, and you will understand the ideal. So that's how it works. The second is the idea of Anda. So this is something that is embedded in the architecture itself. This Anda, what it represents is the dome of heaven. So this particular architecture narrates a story about a Buddhist ideal. That's the dome of heaven. Third is the Harmika. Harmika is this. What Harmika represents is Nirvana. So moksha is a concept that is part of Indian tradition. So Nirvana is what Buddhism calls it. So Harmika represents that. Kshatri, I've already told you, it represents Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, the three tenets. Next is Vedika. Vedika is the boundary between the material and spiritual world. Vedika is in fact the boundary of this stupa. And this boundary represents the ideal of material and spiritual world. The separation between material and spiritual world. Then you have the motifs, various motifs. If you take the Torana or the other architectural structure of Buddhism, you have various motifs. And these motifs, I will give you two examples. For example, take the case of Chakra. Chakra represents Mahaparinirvana, which is the great renunciation of Buddha. So Dharma Chakra Parivalana. This was the first speech that Buddha made in Sarnath. It represents this renunciation. Second is the symbol of elephant. What does it represent? It represents Mayavadi's dream. Mayavadi is Buddha's mother. So she saw an elephant in her dream, and that gives the idea, or that what proclaims the birth of Buddha. So this elephant is represented as Mayavadi's dream, and it is connected to Buddha's birth. So these things are represented in the Toranas. That's the whole idea. So what we have to do in this answer, to be precise, is to draw a stupa, to mark its various parts, to identify each of them, and to connect it with the Buddhist ideal that it is representing. That is the whole idea of this answer. I hope we have brought in almost all of them in this answer. Keep by hearting this, because this is a very fundamental thing when it comes to mains as well as prelims. Now we'll conclude that by saying that these stupas, it was not an original Buddhistic invention. It was something that was inspired through generations. For example, before Buddhism as well, you have this culture of tombs and commemorative stupas. Even after Buddhism, you have this culture of tombs. For example, in the medieval era, you have tombs like Humayun's tomb, Taj Mahal, for example. This is a culture that has precedents as well as successors. In fact, UPSC has asked us in prelims as well whether stupa is an original Buddhist innovation or not. So we'll conclude on that note here. So that's the answer. Thank you for listening.